Hello. I've been studying mind-body practices for about 50 years and got incredible benefit from them. But over the last few years, I spent years interviewing some of the leading scientists in human consciousness and mind-body practices. And what I've come to realize is some amazing things about reality. And I'm going to share these things. Uh, if anything that I say seems too outrageous to believe, then what I recommend is that you get a book that I wrote. It's called The Gospel of Science, Mind-Blowing New Science on Ancient Truths to Heal Our Stress Lives and Planet. It's 700 pages of meticulously end-noted, mind-boggling science that we're just not being told about by mass media and our healthcare system because it would cut into their profits. It would cut into pharmaceutical profits and all kinds of profits that probably should be cut if we can find a more healthy alternative to it. So again, if you doubt anything I'm saying, you can get that book. It's available on Amazon Kindle for $9.99, and it's also in paperback, but it just came out on Audible books as well. And what I discovered is that if you buy the ebook for $9.99, and then you go back in and then purchase the Audible book, they'll offer you the Audible book for $1.99 since you bought the ebook. So you can get both the Audible and the paperback or the ebook with all the data and the graphics and everything, some of which I'll talk about today, for less than you could get the Audible book for. So I highly recommend that for several reasons. The main reason, the epic reason is because it'll give you a much more positive, science-based, realistic, and profoundly hopeful view of our place here on the planet and also of the future of the planet and humanity and the possibility, the incredible possibility. And so, what I've learned from all these years of study on human consciousness, both internally and then externally through the science and talking to scientists, is if you've never heard of the particle wave function in quantum physics, it's a huge thing that everybody should know about. What they do is they shoot particles like photons, for example, through what they call double slits. It's the double slit experiment. And when they shoot those particles through the slits and they're observing it, they go right through the slits and they make two rows of columns on a light sensitive sheet behind the slits, and and that's what you would expect. You'd expect to see two slits reflected on the screen behind because you're shooting particles to the light sensitive screen. But what happens is, and this is what's amazing about it, is when they're not observing the particles, they behave like waves, as if there were a wave going through the two slits, and then an interference wave coming out the back, like if you drop two pebbles in a pond. And so you see like seven different, less precise slits. So you see about seven slits, like waves, like interfering wave patterns would make. And so what that tells you is that human consciousness affects subatomic particles, which is the foundation of reality. And so when they're observing the particles, they behave like particles, like a solid thing going through making the two slits. But then when they don't observe it and they just leave it to itself, it becomes waves. And so this is I think it's more than a metaphor, but you can call it a metaphor if you want to. But what happens is when we go into alpha brainwave state, into a meditative state, we're letting go of observing. We're letting go of consciously controlling our thoughts. And what happens is instead of being a singular entity, a separate person from the universe, when we go into that alpha state, that neutral consciousness state where the mind drifts, and when we were children, we were very adept at this. We were in alpha meditative state most of the time. But then about 7 years old, we start going into the education socialization process, and we get all that squeezed out of us with the linear world. But what happens is when we go into that alpha state, that neutral consciousness where we're just present and experiencing ourselves, but not thinking about it, And when you meditate, you're not in it constantly, but you will drift into it from time to time. And then what happens is we're no longer a particle. We become a wave in the ocean of the universe. And what the science shows is that the foundation of the universe is compassion and love. It's a nurturing universe. So the illusion that we have sometimes when we feel desperate and lonely, that it's us against the universe and the universe is somehow against us, that's all an illusion. The reality of it is that we're part of an ocean of compassion and love. And the science shows all this. It's incredibly beautiful science, and I have it all in the book. And so, what happens is when we let our minds let go and go into neutral, we start to drift and become part of this ocean of nurturing compassion that permeates the entire universe. And what the science shows is that when we go into these coherent states of consciousness, it doesn't stop at the skull. Our pineal gland is crystals, just like radio crystals. And our consciousness, when we go into these states, it emanates in its most powerful form. The science shows that when we're in states of fear and desperation, our consciousness isn't very powerful. It doesn't affect the world around us that much. But when we go into these coherent states of consciousness, then what happens is, or when you go into states of empathy and compassion where we feel connected to the world, that's when our consciousness most powerfully affects the world around us. And it echoes out throughout society. And so I've been a social activist. I never really liked politics. I worked in politics when I found a candidate that I thought was promoting compassionate solutions in the world. But mostly, my activity has been in social issues, human rights, justice, these kind of things, environment. And what I've come to realize is that you can hand people 1,000 leaflets, and if their mind's not open to it, it's not going to do any good. And I've passed out more leaflets than anybody that you'll probably ever meet in your entire life. And understanding the science made me realize that when we go into these states where we let the mind let go and we go into what science calls heart-centered consciousness, where we're open and present and feeling and enjoying our experience of our existence, that is when we become the most powerful. And that's when it echoes out. And the science also shows that when we come together in states of connection and compassion and healing, that has a profound impact on the entire consciousness of the whole of humanity. And Dr. Roger Nelson, who I interviewed on our podcast years ago, he was the 20-year director of research at Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory. And what they found was that human consciousness could affect their computers. It could affect physical reality, initially, is what they found. And then they realized that it could affect their computers. And they ended up creating these random event generators, which are kind of like an electronic coin flipper. And so it flips the coin 200 times per second. And what they found was that human consciousness could affect that. It could change the pattern so that normally it would be like 50-50. That's statistical odds. If you didn't have that, you wouldn't have any casinos in the world. It's going to be about 50-50 if you're flipping a coin 200 times per second. It'll oscillate some, but it's going to hang around that margin, or else there wouldn't be any casinos in the world. So that's a real statistical reality. But whenever humans came together in coherent states of consciousness, what they started to find was that it would affect these, it would send these computers off track. They called it a departure from expectation, or an increased coherence in human consciousness is what it reflected. And Dr. Nelson eventually founded the Global Consciousness Project. And what they did was they put these random event generator computers all over the planet. And the first thing that they realized was during Princess Diana's funeral, when billions of people around the planet were going into coherent consciousness together around Princess Diana, because she was very beloved. She was doing some really beautiful things. She was trying to get the countries that put landmines in war-torn countries to be responsible to go back and take all those landmines out so that kids wouldn't get their legs blown off for decades afterwards. And so she was involved in some really beautiful stuff. And so people really liked her. and it sent their computers off track. And so then what they did was they started studying organized events where people came together in states of coherent consciousness, compassion, healing, and connection. And what they found was in the case of World Tai Chi and Qigong Day, was that during that 24-hour period when they observed it, the computers went off track. They departed from expectation to a p-score of 0.05. 0.05 is considered statistically significant. And so that meant that there was something happening, a greater coherence in global consciousness during that 24-hour period of World Tai Chi and Qigong Day. Now, 15 years after World Tai Chi and Qigong Day was founded, the International Day of Yoga was proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly. And so they looked at the International Day of Yoga. And during that 24-hour period, again, they found that human consciousness went into a greater state of coherent consciousness. And then also World Peace Meditation Day and many other of these type events showed that as well. Now, when you put all these studies together, the cumulative of 20 years of consciousness studies on these kind of things, for 20 years, the statistical odds of this just being pure chance was only 1 in 3 trillion. So we know it's a scientific reality that when we go into coherent states of consciousness, it has an impact on the wider global consciousness of the whole of humanity. And some of the other research that I came across, which validates this nurturing, compassionate universe concept, is the Transcendental Meditation Foundation. They did many studies with universities and local police departments. And the first one that they did was in Washington, D.C. in the 90s. And what they planned to do was to bring in 1%, the equivalent of 1% of the city's population of high-level meditators. And they were working with the local police department, and they told them that they were going to bring the violent crime rates down during the high crime season for this period when they brought these meditators in by 20%. And the police chief wasn't buying it. He kind of laughed it off. But they surprised everybody because not only did they bring the violent crime rates down 20%, they brought them down 23%. And and then also emergency room visits and these type of things decreased as well. And I taught at Folsom Prison many years ago, and they had a Tai Chi Cho program there for 2 years. And one of the inmates was observing prison statistics during that 2 years of their meditation program. And what they found was that not only did the behavior rates improve for the group, the meditating group and the Tai Chi Cho group, but they improved for the entire prison. And so that completely jives with the Transcendental Meditation Foundation research. And the TM Foundation ended up doing a study in 48 cities. And all this science is in the Gospel of Science, meticulously endnoted, so you can go to the source material yourself and know that what I'm saying is true. And so in these 48 cities, where they brought in the equivalent of 1% of high-level meditators, they were able to bring down the violent crime rates in all those cities as compared to the control cities that they were comparing it to. And what's really interesting is that this effect, this positive effect on these cities, it lasted for 5 years after the study was done. So this has profound implications for the future of humanity. And so one of the things that all this science and all this research led to was the formation of the Global Transformation Project. And so if you go to globaltransformationproject.org, you can read down the homepage, get a real feel for what I'm talking about right now. And then also you can look at other pages within it. One of them is the science on mind body. And then another one is mind body in schools. And so what all this data showed us is that it makes absolutely no sense at all that we're not teaching public school children how to go into an alpha meditative state through the use of Dr. Herbert Benson at Harvard. He wrote a great book, which has been read worldwide in many languages, called The Relaxation Response. And he collected the data and the science. And what he talked about was the big five mind-body practices that have tons of science behind them. And that is meditation, Tai Chi, yoga, Qigong, and mindfulness practices. And all these have the ability to bring people into an alpha meditative state. And this alpha meditative state, those of us who've been in mind body for, half a century, like myself, we remember, people thought of these things as some kind of weird Eastern, mystical kind of thing. And they are very magical, but it's a science. It's a science-based practice because what they all do is they have the ability to bring the mind into that alpha brainwave meditative state. And this is a very healing state of consciousness, but it has many other implications and applications as well. And so the what we have here is that this state it's not unusual because when we're children, we're in an alpha meditative state most of the time up to about age 7, like I mentioned before. And then we lose touch with it. So by bringing science-proven mind-body practices into public education, what we're advocating is 1 hour a day of mind-body practice, kindergarten through 12th grade. And it can be taught in age-appropriate ways. I've taught in public education at all different levels over these decades, and you can these practices have ways to be applied to very young children in both yoga and qigong. We have like animal yoga and animal qigong, where children pretend to be like an animal, and they incorporate breathing and mindfulness with, pretending to be a tiger or, something like that. And and these are very effective, and it's very playful and it's very fun, and it has to be. If we're going to teach it in public education, we have to adapt it to the age bracket that we're teaching. And then as they get older, then the mind-body practice can get more and more sophisticated. So by the time they get into high school, they would be, approaching like a mind-body master. And so what we would do is we'd create a whole generation of mind-body masters around the planet. And what would happen is they would never lose touch with that alpha brainwave state. And that's a huge thing because what the data shows is that when we're children, we heal at an incredibly accelerated rate compared to adults. And we learn at an incredibly accelerated rate. I remember reading a study many years ago, and what they found was that if children could keep learning at the same rate that they learn at up to about age 7, if they could keep learning at that rate as they get older, they would have all the doctorate degrees in the world by the time they were like 16 years old. That's how fast we learn when we still have access to that alpha meditative state. It doesn't mean that you're in it all the time. Now, children are in it most of the time, but what the science shows is that just being in it for relatively short periods. Harvard at one time they recommended 20 minutes twice a day, and when I started learning mind-body practices and meditation, that's what I strove for. I strove to meditate for 20 minutes in the morning before I went to work, and then 20 minutes in the early evening when I came home so that I could just let go of all the clutter, all the mental and emotional clutter of the day, and then be in a mode where I could more, be more present and more thoroughly enjoy, my evening hours after work. And so a 1 hour a day public education program, this would give children a powerful practice and trust me, they would once they get out of school, they're going to be searching for mind body classes and groups and organizations that they can be a part of after they get out of school because you just feel so good when you do these things in groups of people. And the science shows that when you do it with a group, it's even more powerful. There's like a group energy to it. And these ancient researchers, yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong, they knew this. Yoga actually means union. It's about union of mind and body, but it's also union with the world around us. And Tai Chi, what Tai Chi means, not the physical exercise, but the term Tai Chi in Chinese, it refers to the universe before the Big Bang, when everything was one, before it exploded out and became positive and negative polarities, or what the Chinese would call yin and yang. And so uh, educating school children in this, it would profoundly benefit them immediately. When you see the science at Global Transformation Project, Science on Education, you'll see, just look through it. It'll blow your mind. And one of the very striking things that you'll find there is that regular meditators, it boosts their IQ by 20 points. So we could be having a whole generation of children with much higher IQs. And at the same time, they'd also be tremendously boosting their immune system, their T cell counts, and their resistance to viruses and disease. And so the end result of this on a medical level is it would save trillions of dollars every year, year after year after year. Dr. Herbert Benson's research showed that up to 90% of the health issues that people face are caused by stress and best treated or prevented by mind-body practices, Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, meditation, mindfulness. And this was supported by a 20-year Kaiser Permanente study. And what they found was that up to about 70% of health issues were caused by stress. And when I contacted Kaiser after I saw that study, I wanted to confirm and validate it. And I talked to Dr. David Sobel at Kaiser, who was familiar with the study, and he was very excited about it. And he said that he said actually that data showed that that number of illness caused by stress could go as high as 85%, depending on how you looked at the data. So we know most illness is caused by chronic unmanaged stress, and then that eventually results in organic dysfunction, or what we call disease, dis-ease. And so, yeah, we could be saving trillions and trillions of dollars. Imagine what the world could do with trillions and trillions of dollars year after year after year after year. Yeah, we could change the whole planet. There'd be no reason for people to be starving anywhere on the planet. So many of the problems that could be solved very inexpensively compared to the savings that we'd be doing. But another thing that happens is when we meditate on a regular basis, it increases the size of the empathy and compassion parts of the brain. And in my book, The Gospel of Science, I have a lot of science on this. And empathy and compassion is our natural state. They've done studies with infants, and they show that they're just naturally very empathetic and compassionate. And so children could be retaining that beautiful empathy and compassion that makes children so shiny and beautiful. I mean, and they have a zest for life, an endless curiosity. They wake up every morning, very excited. And so these mind body practices, they do that for older people like me. I'm almost 70. And if I do my meditations and my mind body practice on a regular basis, go into alpha state on a regular basis, let go of the rat race, it's like my exuberance for life and my ability to entertain possibilities and excitement and be awestruck by the beauty of the world is vastly increased. And this would have an incredible impact on global society. But another thing that happens is when we go into alpha state on a regular basis, like I was saying, the empathy and compassion parts of the brain actually get physically larger. They can see it. It's physically larger. And the stress and fear parts of the brain, which is responsible for so much of our illness, they actually physically shrink when people practice these mind-body practices on a regular basis. So we're not only talking about saving trillions of dollars, but we're talking about a more empathetic and compassionate planet. And ultimately, we're talking about virtually emptying our prisons. Because, like I told you, at Folsom Prison, just a small group of meditating people in that prison had a positive impact on the behavior rates of the entire prison. And for the meditating group, it reduced their return to prison rate is normally about 70% for prisoners. They get so institutionalized, so dysfunctional, so angry, they keep coming back to prison. About 70% of them do. But for that Tai Chi Chuck group at Folsom, it went down to 30%. And we see this in correctional facilities. When they teach people how to meditate, they become more self-aware. The empathy and compassion parts of their brain get larger, and the violent tendencies start to diminish. So we would be creating not only a more compassionate world, but we would be saving trillions of dollars on prison costs, police costs, all these kind of things. And just imagine, I mean, just give yourself a moment to just entertain this possibility. what could the world do with all these extra trillions of dollars? It would take so much economic and economic and financial stress off of us. It's like our health costs would diminish dramatically. People wouldn't have to go bankrupt every time, they get an illness and find out their insurance company doesn't cover everything. And it would just help people maintain that kindness and empathy and compassion that they had as children. And I know when I say that, people say, "Well, wait a minute, kids can be selfish." Yeah, of course they can. But the science shows that there's a natural empathy and compassion that is really powerful in them from even from infancy, even from infancy. They don't want to see other people suffer. And really, when you look at how uh, the foundation of the universe is love and compassion, you start to see that compassionate solutions are what really will solve the challenges that the world is facing. In my book, I have the issue of homelessness, which is becoming a bigger and bigger problem as the economy uh, is troubled and people's lives are troubled because of the troubled economy. And there were two places, Salt Lake City, Utah, and also county in Florida. And what they did was they implemented something called housing first. And what housing first entails is instead of, trying to get people on the street to get their lives together so that they can afford an apartment and get themselves off the street, what they realized is that if people could have a safe, dry, warm place where they could get a good night's sleep every night, that it would help them start to get their lives back together. And then that could lead, and then they would have services that would help people integrate themselves back into, working society. And a lot of the homeless people are working anyway. They just have to sleep in their cars or on the street or whatever, unfortunately. And because there's a lot of working poverty in the nation and probably the world. But anyway, what happened was when they implemented the housing first, and instead of having the police just endlessly hassle the homeless people, they would take them to temporary housing where they would have a place to live, a safe place, dry, out of the rain, out of the streets. And what they found was that both of these local governments saved between 12 and $21,000 per homeless person. For everybody they brought off the street, they were saving 12 to $21,000 in social costs, emergency room visits, all the things that, homelessness entails. And, taking a lot of stress off the police, I'm sure, as well, because they didn't, they were able to take people somewhere where they get a good night's sleep instead of hassling them. That's got to wear on policemen to have to do that. And, because we're all human beings. And so and all this data is in the Gospel of Science, by the way. And once I became aware of this, it made perfect sense. This compassionate foundation of the universe, that we would solve our problems with compassionate solutions. And and then once you realize this, once you see this data, and you realize this 12 to $21,000 savings for every homeless person we get off the streets, you start to realize, why do we have even one homeless person? If the system sees a homeless person on the street, that's 12 and 21, between 12 and $21,000 you and I, taxpayers, could save by getting that person off the street or getting them and their children off the street, which is another horrible aspect of homelessness. The number of children that are homeless on the streets it's heartbreaking. And we could be saving between 12 and $21,000 for every person we get off the streets and into a safe house. And then they can start rebuilding their lives. That's what the data shows. So this empathy and compassion of the universe, it's foundational. In the book, I have a study by uh, uh, Adam Curie. He was one of the researchers at the Princeton University Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory. And so they were studying all kinds of things that had to do with consciousness. And one of the unpublished studies that they did, Adam Curry was describing it in a documentary that I saw called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. And in that documentary, he's describing it, and I have this in the book as well. But what they did was they had a square room that was dark, and then they had a grow light in the center of the room. And so because it was on a random event generator, like I was describing earlier, that would bounce around randomly. And so normally it would bounce around. If you watched it long enough, it would go to each corner about 25% of the time. Because again, that's that statistical reality that there would be no casinos in Las Vegas if there was not such a thing as this statistical reality. So if you give it long enough, it's going to be 25, 25, 25 in all four corners of the room, 25% of the time. But they brought in a living plant and they put this living plant in one of the corners, a living plant that needed the nourishment of the grow light that was on the random event generator. And what happened was that random event generator started sending that light to the corner where the living plant was that needed that light to live. It started shining there much more often statistically than it should have. So what does this tell us? Well, it tells us that it's a nurturing universe, that it's like the universe wants to nurture life. And one of the other studies that I have in the book is our DNA's response to altruistic acts. When what they did was they had people get pleasure in two different ways. One was from altruism, from doing something for the greater good that gave them no personal benefit, financial benefit or whatever, just for the greater good. And then they had people that were, being pleased by selfish, hedonistic pleasures. And they had them describe the feeling that they got, and they both described a similar feeling, kind of an elation that you got from, the selfish pleasure. We're all human. And so they got it from the selfish pleasures, but then they also got that same kind of high from the altruistic pleasures. But what was different was the DNA expression that makes us up, the foundation of our being. The DNA knew the difference. And when people were getting their pleasure from altruistic pleasures, helping the greater good, the DNA expression was more healthful. When they were getting it from selfish pleasures, it diminished the healthful expression of the DNA. So right at the very core of our being, we know that when we do things for the greater good, that it makes us healthier and makes us stronger. And we know from Adam Curry's research that the universe wants to nurture life. And so this is just such a incredibly beautiful universe, but we don't know it because the mass media makes us think that the world is a dismal, apocalyptic place where people are, mean and evil, and you got to watch out for people because they're going to do something horrible to you. That's how most people think. You may say, "Well, I don't think so." Well, if you look at statistics, you look at public opinion polls. And if you spend a lot of time in the public, like I do, because I'm teaching lots of people every week in my mind body classes, and I poll people, I ask them, one of the things that I ask them in my classes is I say, do you think that violent crime is worse than it has been before? And they all think so. I mean, it's very unusual that anybody doesn't think so. They say, well, of course it is. I watch the news, don't you? Yeah, we know how the world is. Well, here's the problem, which isn't really a problem. It's really a beautiful thing, but it's a problem for people that put all their faith in the news, because actually violent crime rates in the United States are at 40-year lows. They've been dropping precipitously for 40 years. And it's not just the United States. In the Gospel of Science, I have data that is also United Nations data, and it shows that this effect, this phenomenon of violent crime rates dropping, is happening in many countries all over the world. And sociologists, they can't explain it because it's not due to certain policing or anything like that, because all these countries and cities have different, ways of doing things. But what science that I've talked about before, where when you get a small percentage of a population going into coherent states, meditative states of consciousness, that it dramatically reduces the violence for the city. Well, that's been happening around the planet. Mind-body practices over the last 40 years have been expanding exponentially around the planet. In schools, healthcare, senior care, you name it. Hundreds of millions of people are practicing these things. And so it's creating greater coherence in the global consciousness. And so violent crime rates are actually at 40-year lows. And another thing that most people don't know, which I have the data in the Gospel of Science, is uh, the planet Earth is actually vastly less violent than it's ever been before in human history. Now, that doesn't mean that injustice and violence isn't happening in the world, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't care about that. We should, and that's one of the reasons that it's diminishing is because people do care, and so that compassion, that state of compassion, uh, also bolstered by the spread of mind-body practices around the planet, that's having an effect on global violence. And so again, the planet Earth is vastly less violent than it's ever been before in human history. And if you doubt that, in my book, in the Gospel of Science, I refer to a book called The Better Angels of Our Nature by a social psychologist named Steven Pinker out of Harvard. And he has a huge book, like 700-page book, and he has a uh, meticulously cited chronology of violence on the planet Earth. And it shows without a doubt that the planet is vastly less violent than it's ever been before in human history. So we're living in a really beautiful, nurturing world with a nurturing universe. And we're living in a society with really beautiful people. And we have a gorgeous planet. Of course, we have environmental concerns, but there's a lot of things that we don't hear about regarding the environment, which are things that we should know. I mean, we should be seeing the bigger picture, just like with violent crime. And, I mean, of course, we all want to lessen violent crime, but the problem is the fear. When we're in a state of fear, it doesn't add to the solutions and possibility of the planet. So, for example, in the United States, we imprison more of our people than any country in the world. Now, why would that possibly be if violent crime rates are at 40-year lows? Well, perhaps because a lot of prisons are privatized. And so people are making a lot of money off of putting people in prison. So how does that happen? Well, how does it happen? Just because people want to make money doesn't mean it's going to happen. Well, what happens is we end up voting for politicians who are tough on crime, the crime that's at 40-year lows, but they don't say that because they get our votes by putting us in a state of fear. And mass media gets our media viewership by putting us in states of fear. A CNN executive was caught on video saying, "Fear sells. We sell fear." And so, if you look at the public opinion polls, most people think that violent crime rates are just out of control and that we live in this apocalypse on the edge of this apocalyptic society where everything's just going to fall apart and people are going to be animals. And it's just none of it is true. None of it is true. I know that's shocking. And it's not just the news, it's the entertainment too. All the scripts, most of the scripts and most of the shows that we watch, it's a horrible, evil world that somebody is saving us from. They're the superhero or whatever. And I loved reading superhuman comics when I was a kid. So I don't have anything against superheroes, but we get this image planted in our mind of a really ugly world, and we've just got to shake that off. And that's one of the big reasons that I wrote the Gospel of Science, second edition, so that people can see the data, see the reality, and start spreading the gospel of science, of reality to people, so that they can get out of this dismal, apocalyptic, grody perception of the people around them and the world around them and the possibilities of the planet. And so, like I was saying, even like on the environmental front, there's things that we're not hearing, just like we're not hearing the good news about diminishing violence. One of the things that is happening is as there is more CO2 in the atmosphere, it's causing a greening of the planet because plants feed on CO2. So the more CO2 you get in the atmosphere, then the more plants you get. And the more plants you get, the more oxygen you get. because that's what plants do. They make oxygen. And so there's a homeostatic effect that nobody talks about in the media because the media is all fear-based. And another thing that the media doesn't talk about is regarding the environment is that we're actually in a cooling period in human history, or in the history of the planet. And so there's been times, with where the planet's been covered with complex life forms where uh, it was much, much hotter than it is now. So we're actually in a cooling period. And the reason that caught my attention when I saw that graph, it was just in the Washington Post not long ago. And the reason that caught my attention is because one of the things that you see, like regarding violence, is you'll see media headlines that will be screaming, violent crime shot up this year. Well, okay, what happened? I have the FBI data in the book, in the Gospel of Science, and so this 40-year descent of violent crime came all the way down here, and then there might be a year where it comes up like this much, and then the headlines that you see scream violent crime, right? Doubled over last year. Okay, well, it doubled over last year, but it's still at a 40-year low. Now, it would be so much more relaxing if the media said violent crime rates are still at 40-year lows, but they did double last year. So, we got to pay attention to that, but that's not what the headlines say. They never do. And so it really caught my attention when I saw that Washington Post data, which showed the longer history of humanity, not just the short period that's been covered to create these screaming headlines that we're all going to be underwater next year. And a lot of the projections that were made, I mean, I was really worried about my daughter because she lives in Florida. And I was really worried about her for years. And I was trying to get her not to buy a house there. And because I was convinced that they were going to be underwater by now, because that's what we've been told, but they're not. And now I'm not saying that there's not a warming effect, but there's a lot of factors involved with that. And we should be stewards of the planet. We should be doing whatever we can to minimize, the footprint that we have on the planet. So I'm not diminishing any of that. I just want to get out of this panic and fear hysteria that the media promotes to give viewers. And so what caught my attention was after I had seen how violent crime rates were manipulated by media, where you had this huge drop, but then if you'd have a little increase, then they would make you think that it was way higher than it had ever been in modern civilization, and it's not. It's way down at the bottom, and that's exactly what that graph in the Washington Post looked like. You had this cooling period of the planet, and then just in the last 100 years or so, you had this little spike up, but we're still in a cooling period. And uh, and so again, I'm not diminishing, the need to be good stewards of the planet. I've supported that my whole life, and I still do. But what I'm trying to get across is that we're not going to solve our problems by being in a state of panic and fear based on a partial awareness of what's going on. And so, we all need to do our own homework. But the main thing that I want to get people to do is to start practicing mind-body practices so that we can let that stress and fear part of the brain start to diminish. And we can let the empathy and compassion parts of the brain start to expand. And some of the other things that happen when we go into meditative state on a regular basis is we start operating more in what's called gamma wave consciousness. And that's a higher state of consciousness. It's a multi-dimensional form of consciousness where we see things from many different angles and many different dimensions. And so, so that would enable somebody like us to, for example, want to diminish violent crime even more. Even though it's a 40-year low, we'd like to see it diminish more. So we'd like to see, programs like mind-body education and public education become a foundational part of public education because we know that if kids were learning how to do this, they'd be much less likely to end up in prison. We see that in the prison statistics, and we see that schools that incorporate mind body, they see their bullying rates go down. Kids become more empathetic and compassionate. And most bullying, and I think in a lot of cases, a lot of violent crime, it's I've worked with school people in schools, psychologists, that are working on bullying issues and things like that. And a real common phrase that you'll hear from them is that hurt people hurt people. And so if we can be teaching kids how to find their place in this world through mind-body practices, find that homeostasis, that being less depressed, less anxiety driven, no matter what's going on at home, if they had an hour a day of mind-body practices, it would give them tools to really avoid a lot of the catastrophic behaviors that do end up leading kids to prison. And uh, and so you know this gamma wave consciousness, it gives us an opportunity to see the bigger picture from different angles. And so yes, we want to see violent crimes go down, but we also realize that making more prisons and getting tougher and tougher and tougher and tougher on crime, it's not going to solve the problem because you get 70% of those people going right back into prison. It just makes a lot of money for people. It's not solving the problem. So this gamma wave consciousness enables us to see more elegant solutions to this problem. And and then, of course, the other thing that happens when we practice these things is that our IQs go up. Our IQs go up by 20 points, so we're able to entertain more things. Another thing that happens with consciousness is that we tend to get into old patterns of seeing the world. Like, for example, I was doing a podcast with a yoga organization not that long ago. And on the podcast was me and a couple of yoga teachers, one from India and one from the United Kingdom. And so I was explaining to them, that actually violent crime rates are at 40-year lows, and we should be, telling our students that the world's not violent and dangerous as they think it is, because our goal as mind-body teachers is stress management. And stress is what kills most people. It's not the dangerous people they scare us about on TV. And so, I was telling them, as mind-body teachers, we should be telling our students, that it's not true that the world's, getting more and more dangerous and more violent and out of control. We should be telling them the data. And I told them the data, and I told them it's in the book if they want to look at it. And just like 5 minutes after I told them that, these two yoga teachers, one in India and one in UK, they started bemoaning, the empathy that they have for their students. And one of them actually said, and I can understand why my students are so stressed because, the streets are just so much more violent than they used to be. and mind body teachers shouldn't be doing that because it's not true. It's not reality. They shouldn't be sitting there with their students going, oh, yeah, isn't that horrible? The planet's so horrible because it's not true. And so after that podcast, I actually got online and I did some research to see. I thought, okay, maybe in the UK and India, violent crime, maybe it's going down all over the planet, but in the UK and India, it's different because these teachers were so adamant about their students, feeling so sorry for their students because their students were just mired in this violent society where crime is just so horrible on the streets. Well, violent crime rate was at decades lows in the UK and India. Well, why didn't these teachers know that? Because they watch the news. They watch the same distorted, fear-based news that their students watch. And so then they feed that fear. Because I get students in my classes, I'll hear them sitting around, before class when they first start. They don't do it after a while because I straighten them out. But, I'll hear them when they first start, I'll hear them talking to each other before class starts, about, oh, this horrible thing or the crime. Oh, it's all out. Oh, it's so bad. The world's so bad. And I tell them, look, I just have to tell you, that's not true. That's not true. Violent crime rates are 40-year lows. The planet's vastly less violence than it's ever been before. Of course, we should be concerned about those things, but we got to keep things in perspective so that we stay in a coherent state of consciousness and we don't add to the fear and the desperation in the planet because our consciousness is rippling out through the consciousness of the planet. And so when we go into a reality-based state of consciousness and go into alpha state and feel that safety and feel that compassion of the universe and let that ripple out from us, that is contributing to the evolution of the planet, a reality-based planet, a compassionate world, a compassionate universe. When we have these unreal fears that were fed to us by somebody in a newsroom or somebody that writes scripts, for this fear-based, entertainment media that we get, that doesn't contribute to the planet, and it causes us to imprison more of our people than any country in the world, and it's a brutal thing. It ruins people. It ruins their families. It ruins a lot of things. It ruins society. We could be offering these children long before they get to prison something that could transform their lives and be good for all of us because we'd all be saving trillions of dollars in saved health and social and, prison, police costs, all these kind of things. And also, ultimately it would diminish the violence around the planet. Because the United States, for example, we spend 61 cents on every discretionary tax dollar on military related spending. 61 cents, the majority. The majority of our discretionary tax dollars goes to military related spending. And why is that? It's because of the fear that we get pumped into. They make us think that the whole world is dangerous, and it's not just news media. If you watch, American Hollywood entertainment, a lot of times, if there's somebody in a movie that is going to another country outside of the United States, something horrible is going to happen to them. That's just the scripts. And we keep getting this pumped into our heads, and it's just not true. Anybody that travels the world like I have, I've been all over the world because of World Tai Chi Day. I'm not rich or anything, but we get invited to go to different countries for World Tai Chi Day occasionally, and they fly us over. But anywhere that we've ever traveled, people have been extremely kind to us. They like to help. If you get lost, they'll help you. They'll go way out of their way to help you. We were in Taiwan, and a couple of Taiwanese high school girls, they saw us at a McDonald's with big suitcases, and our kids were exhausted and sleeping in the McDonald's. And they looked at the map and showed us where our hotel was, and they ended up helping us like roll the luggage so that we could carry the kids to the hotel. We these things happen to us constantly when we're traveling. Now, you can travel and have a bad experience if you suspect everybody around you of being dangerous. They're going to pick that vibe up from you. And this is all science. This is all science. But if you go out like we do and you trust the world and you know that it's a nurturing universe, people help you. People want to help you. And so the United States is kind of like us traveling. If, I've heard people from other countries say the US foreign policy is done through the barrel of a gun. If you don't agree with us, you're going to pay for it. And that's how our foreign policy is run. And most Americans, if they knew how it was run, they wouldn't agree with it. Most of them don't agree with it anyway, even with the stilted information that we get from our mainstream media. But I would say almost all of them wouldn't agree with it if they really did some research and really found out, how foreign policy is run through the barrel of a gun. And so we could be saving trillions of dollars every year. We could be reducing our military expenditures. We don't have to have, 1,000 military bases all over the planet. We have military bases surrounding Russia. We have military bases surrounding China. You see any Chinese or Russian military bases around the United States and Mexico or Canada or anywhere? No, no. We know what happens if somebody tries to do that. We saw it with the Cuban Missile Crisis. No, that's not allowed. But we have these other countries surrounded with military bases, and they've seen our military overthrow countries. In Iraq, 1 million people died, most of them civilians. Vietnam, I think it was at least 1 million, maybe 2 or 3 million, especially if you include Cambodia and Laos. And this has been going on our whole lives. And all that could come to an end. All that could come to an end if we create greater coherence and empathy and compassion in the mind, and so that we can see the world in reality, see it clearly, see how people are, that they're kind, the overwhelming number of humanity are very compassionate and kind. I've seen studies where they've gone to countries and they've dropped a wallet on the ground that had money in it or credit cards in it or whatever. Most of the time, that wallet gets returned with the money in it, with the money in it. It's like I saw a news program and they hired a news station. Set up their cameras in some old lady's house, and they disconnected something in their furnace, in the lady's furnace, and then they called repair guys to come and look at the furnace. And virtually almost in every case, there was one guy that actually tried to profiteer off of that and make some money. But virtually in every case, those repairmen told that old lady, "Oh, this was just disconnected. I plugged it in. Now it works." This is how people are. When you turn on the TV or when you look at the magazines or when you watch the movies or stuff, that is not reality. But people, people in my classes that sit and stew in that false reality all day long, you cannot convince them that that's not true. And in fact, they get mad at me. They'll get mad at me when I tell them that violent crime rates are at 40-year lows. And I know why, because what's happening in their heads is their whole picture of reality is being shaken. And that really, that's good. I mean, they should be, when they hear that, they should go, oh, that's good. That's such a relief. Oh my God, I'm so glad violent crime rates are 40. No, no. If they're really stewed and locked into all this stuff, they'll get mad. They'll get mad at you. So they don't want to hear the good news of science. Yeah, they don't want to hear how beautiful people are and how this beautiful this planet is, how beautiful this universe is. So anyway, let's just have a little meditation here, and just to close this. So let's just let the eyes close easily and naturally. Nice full breaths, just feeling ourselves just settle into the chair, feeling our seats settle in, our bottoms, our feet, just letting the earth start to hug us. Feel the shoulders relax down away from the neck as we let go. Feel the eyes letting go, those tiny optical muscles and the soft tissue around them. Feel the cheeks and the sinuses softening and opening. Feel the brow and the forehead and the sinuses softening and opening. We don't make it happen, we just let it happen. Feel the tip of the tongue lightly touching the gum line behind the top two front teeth. And that sensation brings us back from the world, back to here and more into what science is calling heart-centered consciousness, where we're feeling more than thinking. Enjoying the sensation of the cool waves of breath, filling us from the abdomen all the way up into the airy fibers of the lungs. And on those sighing exhales, just letting the shoulders relax down and away from the neck. Everything we are, letting go of everything that we've held onto. Letting go of the day, the week, any plans that we have later on this gorgeous day. So that each releasing breath finds us falling deeper and deeper into the center of where we are, right here and right now. And as we breathe and let go of our grip on ourselves again and again, there's just more and more space for an opening lightness to expand through. This energy field that we are, and that's all we are, that's what science shows us. It's just an energy field that can get, and what these ancient Chinese and Indian researchers realize is this energy field that we are, it can get squeezed and tight, from our thoughts and worries and fears. But through visualization and breathing techniques, we can actually begin to let this field of energy that we are just start to sigh, just start to let go and allow more space for this natural opening lightness to just permeate through us. Let the mind and the heart sigh. Let the energy field of the mind and the heart sigh and let go of its grip. And just allow space for a lightness of being. As we just lift to a higher, more subtle vibratory rate, a feeling of lighted awareness permeating everything that we are. Feel the heart sighing and letting go of its hold on things, allowing more space for lightness. Our heart is actually much larger than we think it is. The heartmath.org science shows that the electromagnetic emanations of the heart are measured 16 feet away, so 32 feet across. So we got this big, huge energy heart. And we can let our squeezed perception of our heart just start to sigh and let go and open to that large, lighted heart. Letting go of our hold on fear and tension, letting the center of the mind let go, and knowing that it's safe to let go. We can just drift and lose ourselves. We don't have to keep track of what we're doing here. It's okay to get lost. Just drift. The more we breathe and let go, the more space for that opening lightness that we are. We're soothed and nurtured in this nurturing lightness and radiance. And it's okay to lose ourselves, lose our sense of selves as we just melt into this endless ocean of nurturing, connected light that permeates the whole universe all the time. Feeling our mind and body just let go with every breath to open and lighten. Good. And with the eyes still closed, let the tip of the tongue lightly touch the gum line behind the top two front teeth, mouth slightly open. And as we let ourselves fill with this full abdominal breath, we'll count 1 through 5 in our heads. And by the time we get to 5, we'll be full of breath. And then on that sighing exhale, as we relax, let that sigh relax out, we continue counting 6 through 12 on the sighing exhalation. So we'll just repeat this again and again. 1 through 5 in, 6 through 12 out. Very natural, very effortless, just kind of relaxing out of the way and enjoying how it feels. 1 through 5 in, 6 through 12 out. And the mind may drift and wander, but we don't criticize it. We don't think of ourselves as doing this good or bad or right or wrong. We just come back to the tip of the tongue, 1 through 5 in, 6 through 12 out. We just play with meditation. Very natural, very effortless. 1 through 5 in, 6 through 12 out. Good. And with the eyes still closed, just start tapping your fingertips and thumb tips around your calves, shins, and knees. So just go round and around the calves, shins, and knees. Very effortless. We just let the whole body just sigh and let go. Back, shoulders, arms, hands, wrists, fingers. So we just let it roll through us very effortlessly. And then it's like we're in a day spa. And we're just here to enjoy these soft, gentle explosions of sensation echoing through the field that we are. We're just here for the pleasure of it and really enjoying it, really appreciating it, just like we would if somebody that we knew was doing this for us. We'd show our gratitude by really enjoying it, this tapping massage. So we're just receiving, we're not the doers, just really enjoying what it feels like. And so we create a new relationship with ourselves as we play with this. We appreciate ourselves for being able to give ourselves this pleasure, this moment in the cosmic day spa, just getting this nice tapping massage around our calves, shins, and knees, just for the pleasure of it. Nice. And then tapping up and down the thighs, coming at them from all angles and letting it be kind of erratic so we're not controlling it or anything. And those energy fingers, they tap right through, far beyond. And it feels so good to just let them in deep, and knowing that they're breaking up the old, stagnant, and rigid, so that we can open to this newness and possibility that we are, that's unfolding through us. Just we're like a shining light, shining this lightness and openness and possibility out when we just let go. So the Tao Te Ching is kind of the philosophy book of Tai Chi and Qigong. And in the Tao Te Ching, it has a great line. It says, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be. And so we're just constantly letting go of what we are, and we're just hearing the cosmic day spa just to enjoy this cleansing tapping echoing through our being and field, letting it in deep, just for the pleasure of it, like if somebody else was doing it for us. Nice, and all over the abdomen, torso, and those energy fingers just going right through organs, ribs, heart, lungs, thymus, everything. And letting those energy fingers just tap right through our opening heart. Just let those energy fingers just go right through our big opening heart, just to enjoy how it feels. And we can let the heart sigh and just let go and just let it in ever deeper. That cleansing vibration, tapping our beautiful big heart. and then over the thymus gland and the upper chest, about halfway between the heart and throat. And that's just those energy fingers just going right through, and that vibration's just breaking up the old and stagnant, the stuff that causes suppression and depression here, so that we can open to that natural inspiration and elation that just naturally wants to shine through us like it did when we were children. When we let go. Nice. And then up and down the side under the arm there, getting up into the armpit a little bit. Those lymph nodes are just loving it. And us enjoying them, enjoying this is a very healing state of consciousness. And the science on this is beautiful. Those lymph nodes, they love to be enjoyed, like we're enjoying them right now, just enjoying the sensation. Just like everything in the universe, everything in the universe loves to be noticed and enjoyed and appreciated and loved. Those lymph nodes are just shining in there. Nice. And then up and down the other side, those lymph nodes just shining in there. Nice. And then up around the collarbone, the shoulders, exploring all those little nooks and crannies. And it just feels so good. Just doing it for the pleasure of it. Just like when we were kids and we do stuff just for fun, just see what it feel like. Nice. Good. And then just clapping our hand on our collarbone and shoulder, as we might do to comfort someone. And just really letting it in. And we can feel it comforting us, comforting our opening heart, as we just let that just pat right through us. Really appreciating ourselves for giving ourselves this comfort, becoming nurturing companions to ourselves, giving up the criticism and self-judgment, remembering what we are, which is beautiful, beautiful, elegant human beings. That's what we are. Human beings are some of the most elegant, beautiful beings in creation. And I know that the mass media culture, it diminishes, our beauty. It doesn't celebrate it that much, unless they're trying to sell you a product that makes you more beautiful. But we're already beautiful. And really just letting that in, letting that pat right into our opening heart. Nice. And then over the other shoulder and collarbone. Really feeling that path, that nurturing, just vibrate right through our opening heart. Good. And then giving ourselves a nice pat on the back. And we can switch arms so that we don't get tired. We want to give ourselves time to really receive this affirmation, this pat on the back, and knowing that we deserve it. Everybody today deserves good pats on the back, more than they're getting. And so really appreciating ourselves for giving ourselves this, letting it right into our opening heart. Nice. And up those two rows of muscles, back of the neck. And that's an extraordinary sensation. Those energy fingers are just patting right through our spine. When we're really present, it's extraordinary. And then up into the base of the skull and back of the head. And as the whole field size, including the center of the brain, the pineal gland, just letting go of control, this vibration just becomes the universe. And it's this beautiful cleansing vibration, shattering all the old and stagnant and rigidified, so that we can open to the possibility of newness and what we're becoming, which is beautiful. We don't have to know what it is or define it. It's just being open, open to the possibility of beauty and expansion, really loving ourselves and the beautiful planet that we have here to exist in. Nice. And then lightly around the throat. And those energy fingers just going right through throat and thyroid are loving it. And us enjoying them, enjoying that very healing state. Science calls it gratitude consciousness, when we enjoy the sensation of our existence. And that thyroid just starts shining in there. There's nothing better than a happy thyroid. And as we get up into the face, it's just so effervescent, just kind of, lightly smacking our face. There's no limit to how much we can let the face slacken open to receive ever more of this kaleidoscopic pleasure. And the jaw slackening endlessly open, letting the ears slacken and open with them. The face behind the face letting this in. And those energy fingers, they're tapping right through jaws, teeth, sinuses, eyes, brain, everything. It just feels so good when we're really present, just feeling nice. And then tapping our fingers over our forehead. And those energy fingers are going right through the third eye, the pineal gland, center of the brain. It feels so good to just let it happen. Enjoy this nice brain massage. And over the temples and the skull and the scalp. Nice. And with the eyes still closed, just giving ourselves a few moments here just to breathe and tingle, just to float in this silken, effervescent radiance. And what the science shows is that our bodies are healing machines when we just relax out of the way. When we just relax out of the way. That's beautiful. In this beautiful, nurturing planet and universe. When we go into an alpha meditative state, when the mind just kind of drifts into neutral or when we're enjoying experiences, the brain waves go to about 8 hertz, somewhere around there. And 8 hertz is about the vibratory rate of the planet Earth, the background, the Schumann resonance. And so it's really interesting. These people that invented meditation thousands of years ago somehow knew that when we go into the vibratory, when our brains go into the vibratory rate of the planet, that's very healing. And the science shows all this. And we can also when we do the ohm sound, that's 432 hertz. Well, that's the background vibration of the universe. How did these people figure this stuff out thousands of years ago? I don't know, but it's really beautiful and we can enjoy it right now. Let's just do a few ohms here. So the key to the vibrational meditation is we just let ourselves be filled with that full abdominal breath really effortlessly, just let ourselves be inflated by it. And then we just let the breath relax out of us, and the mouth and throat will shape to make the om sound. But we let go of the idea of making a sound. We want to just let that sound just vibrate through us. And it'll vibrate, of course, through our thorax and, palate and brain and everything, but it'll vibrate all the way out through us and beyond us, out into the world if we just let go and just give it space. And so then whenever we need a breath, we just get another breath so we don't have to do it in unison. You may be oming while I'm breathing in, and you may be breathing in while I'm oming. And so we just kind of let it just kind of take on this drone. So here we go. Oh. And let go of control so that vibration can just go right through the brain and the pineal gland. We don't try to make it, we just let go. Oh. 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 Good. And with the eyes still closed, notice how we're continuing to vibrate our whole field. It's like we've been struck like a cosmic tuning fork. And so we can just float in this tingly, lighted awareness, just enjoying how it feels, letting the mind and the heart let go of rush and analysis so we can just marinate in this tingly effervescence. And we can continue floating in this even as we'll eventually begin a very gradual soft focusing of the eyes on anything but the computer screen or TV screen. But there's no rush. We don't have to do it right away. Just kind of letting ourselves just drift back on the waves of the universe, enjoying the transition. So that even as we do begin to become visual, we don't really fix or focus on anything. but we continue to open to that field awareness, that radiant, unfocused consciousness. So if the eyes focus, just let them unfocus, where we're just kind of seeing everything, but nothing in particular. And then that's an easy step to just let the center of the mind, that pineal gland, let go and unfocus. And then we're just present, we're just feeling everything, but we're not focused on any one thing. And the brain's going into alpha state when we go into that unfocused neutral state of consciousness. So just playing at it, never thinking in terms of, oh, I'm not doing this right, or oh, I can't do this. None of that stuff. No, we're just playing like kids, just drifting into that unfocused radiant awareness. We can get really adept at it even with our eyes open. And it comes in really handy. So when you're stuck at a red light, instead of going into a panic mode, which we often do, even though we might not admit it, that fight or flight response kicks in when we hit a red light. No, we just kind of soft focus on the sky behind the red light and just go into alpha state. And the Harvard research shows that even little tiny itsy bitsy meditations have a really huge cumulative effect. It's like putting money in the health bank. Or if we're stuck in a supermarket line or traffic or anything, we can just kind of soft focus and just kind of go into alpha state, get some deep healing benefit going while we're just hanging out. I always tell my students, it's like once you learn how to do this stuff, you should never be bored again for the rest of your life because you can always go into alpha state. And then when we come out of it, the world's shinier and more beautiful because we've kind of rebooted our computer a little bit there. All right. So, well, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you'll share it. And I may start some live Zoom classes on Thursdays or maybe on a weekend if people can't do it on Thursday afternoons. And so you can email me at WTCQD2000 at AOL.com. And these will be free donation-based classes. So if you can afford to donate, that would be excellent. If you have a good retirement or something like that. But I know a lot of people, it's a hardship. And so I don't want anybody to be inhibited from, emailing me about these donation-based classes and attending for free, if that's what you need to do. I know how that feels. Tai Chi teachers aren't rich, so I'm in tune. I'm in tune with the economic vibe of the planet. But for anybody that it does have a secure, retirement or whatever, and you feel like donating to it, that money will go to a good cause because me and my wife, we've donated our lives to organizing World Tai Chi Day, which has educated hundreds of millions of people around the planet on the science on Tai Chi and Qigong and mind-body practices. And we're also volunteers organizing the Global Transformation Project. And so the money will go to a good cause if you can afford to donate. But if you can't, make sure you still come because we don't. The money's not the motivation here. We're trying to have a positive impact on the planet. And so if you can tell people about these free programs and you can give them our email address if they're interested in the free online Zoom classes, that'd be great. And and if they can't afford to donate, make sure they understand we want them to come and do it for free. And so we'll keep all those emails and we'll let everybody know when we get enough people to get this free Zoom class going. And then we hope you go to globaltransformationproject.org and sign the petition and share the petition with people to get advocate for mind-body education and public education worldwide. And it'll be a non-binding UN resolution that we're shooting for. So no country, no school, no student be forced to do it. You can't teach mind-body that way. It has to be an elective. It has to be something that students want to do. And so anytime we teach in public schools, we always tell the teachers, you need to have an option of like a study hall or something. And then that way, any kids that don't want to participate in the mind body can go to that study hall. And we rarely have a student that does that. And they always regret that they did it when they come back because all the students in the class are going, whoa, that was cool. Yeah. So we can change the world and the world is already beautiful and we can just make it ever more beautiful. And that's our goal here. So Yeah, I hope you'll share this video and let people know about the coming free Zoom classes and get them to sign the petition, and we'll change the world. Thanks. Thanks for coming. That was a lot of fun.